I wanna hunt like David. I wanna kill me a giant.
Hello, my wonderful people. This is Wil, your werewolf, and this is Werewolf, the podcast. Today, I'm carrying on with When the Police Captured Me, so hopefully you've gone back to the prior episode and listened to that, or you've listened to that one before you've listened to this one, because then that one would then help you with this one, because then that would make sense. Yeah, it's episode 30 something, 34, that's the one, and I'm just going to carry on with the story. Hopefully you realise I've been captured by the police. This one's called What Happens in Prison Stays in Prison. You have to remember, the police had no idea that I was a werewolf. I mean, the word of the young child that a big dog had been killing people was taken as, well, a kid being stupid. I was rushed into a local police station where they put me in a can with 8 gangbangers. I think that is what kids these days would call them. You know, cans and gangbangers. All locals and from one of the toughest mobs that ran the area. See, I'm down with the kids. I think the authorities wanted to put the middle-class white boy in the cell to get a kicking and maybe more. I mean, if you think about it, I'd been a bit of a cunt. I sat on my bench showing no reason for them to be pissed, but this was an opportunity for them not to be missed. Obviously, the police had given them the all clear to have some fun with me. Well, they probably had not said anything like that, but had created a scenario in which the bad things could happen to me. I mean, I had a reputation for killing quite a few of them in the past, the police that is. The posit was not being respectful towards the gang either, as he wandered around the cell and took the general piss out of these big hard men. He could not get over the fact that they all had their pants, you know, kind of around their thighs, showing their asses, and in contrast I was there in a shirt and blue chinos. Okay, slightly bloodied and damaged, but still slightly, you know, out of character with my new chums. The posit was desperately trying to get me to fucking laugh, so that I would get in trouble. He's a bit of a dick like that every now and again. With his antics and impressions of those in the cell, I could not help it and broke. I always found him very amusing. This gave the gang of people some reason to start some shit with the silly older man. Eventually I began to laugh, as you young people say, LOL. Means out loud, yeah, see? The gang were getting a little annoyed at this look of comfortable mirth and began to talk amongst themselves. I could smell the young men's discomfort at my behaviour. Was I not meant to be a snivelling ball of fear in the corner? I should not be laughing and seemingly enjoying myself as they did their combined group intimidation thing. I'd already worked out the social order of the group. Who was the leader, who's the thinkers, and who were the thugs. One of them was volunteered to make a move for the group. He came wandering over in his baseball vest with his obvious 69 as the logo. His jeans hung at the bottom of his arse cheeks, which seemed to make his walking a little bit more difficult. He had the intimidating walk of the young man from all around the world. He strutted his way towards me, swinging his arms away from his body, holding his arms out from his body as though he was holding 2 rolled up carpets. He was fucking hilarious to watch as he bobbed up and down with each step, but it really was funny to see the posit strutting alongside him on his back legs with his front legs swinging. Fen, for a wolf, was doing a very accurate copy of the thug's scary face. The boy must have thought that I was laughing at him. Not the case. I was laughing at both posit and the man, because they looked like they were straining for a shit. And that was it. I lost it, breaking into laughter and crying at the man and the posit's actions. "Hey, bruv, what you finding so funny? You laughing at us, blood?" he said, pointing to his crew. Strange accent for a tall, ginger, white boy, but hey, what am I to say? Fen was still ripping into him, doing a perfect mimic, and I was desperately trying not to laugh, but sometimes it gets too much. At times like this, I believe that honesty is always the best policy. Mate, I was laughing at the fucking stupid way that you've your jeans. Blood. I've never seen anything as silly as that in my life. They're down by your knees. This upset the big posturing and very spotty white boy. He obviously was trying to impress his gang pals. It's funny, is it? Man, he asked me. You find me funny, disrespecting me in front of my brothers? He said, pointing to the rest of his crew. I leant forward and stopped laughing. My face became very serious very quickly. Yes, I am laughing at you because you look and appear to be stupid. I smiled at him. The youth physically deflated at this. He did not expect me to actually offer any kind of fight, I think. He turned towards his friends for some kind of support. They waved him on while the leader sucked his teeth at him. He turned back towards me, a little nervous now. I think I'd be having your shoes, man. They look my style if I was a fucking granddad. He did that shaky thing of clicking thing that, that's dead cool when you're 15 while getting laughs from the others behind him. I looked down at my once beautiful brown boots and sighed. That somewhat hurt my feelings. I looked him in the eyes. These, my friend, are lokes. And although they do look a bit weird with no laces, they are a truly classic vintage style. I looked back at him, expecting him to understand. He then played his cards a little early. I mean, he could have tried to play the intimidating game a little longer, but no, he went straight into the threat of violence. I was so disappointed. I mean, he had no class. Not laughing now, are yous? I think I'm going to slap you up, innit? He now tells me. I had to kind of translate it in my head. And then encouragement came from the group behind him. Yeah, bruv, says another man. Slap him about, innit? I feel so despondent. Young people's vocabulary these days is terrible. I mean, did they not do enough reading or something? I mean, he took a little too long to make the first move. The nerves were almost getting the better of him. He had to do this to prove his worth. Then out of nowhere, he went to slap me as I sat there. I mean, that is just so ungentlemanly that he never even gave me the opportunity to stand to defend myself. As his right hand came towards my head, I caught it with my own right hand just before it made contact with my face. I stopped it dead in the air and looked up at him at that moment, making thorough eye contact with the man. And then, it was that moment, I saw his face change as he realised that he had fucked up. Yo, blood, have this, I said as I dragged his wrist directly down, dragging the man down towards me and pulling him off balance. He fell head first towards me as I sprang upwards in response, my hairline connecting with his jaw, hitting it full force. My reward was the wonderful feeling of the jaw and lower half of his skull deforming around my forehead as I took my head literally into his. He flew backwards off his feet with the force of my headbutt. I had a moment of artistic joy as teeth and bits of bone came tearing through his face, the skin ripping apart and falling away. I love these moments of slow motion where the droplets of blood and the shattered bits fly around in the air, eventually dropping to the floor, not in a random pattern, but a pattern dictated by a little bit of physics. Floppy flaps of skin hung around that deconstructed jaw. Again, artwork. From the upward movement and strike, he was lifted off his feet and flew in the other direction. He continued to fall back, and when he was almost horizontal to the floor, I yanked his wrist towards me, getting a lovely popping sound as the shoulder dislocated, and getting him in response to the force to start once again moving towards me. As he came back to the vertical with his feet just off the floor, I added a right round kick through his body, my shin hitting his pelvis and crushing it in one blow. I felt it smash and break into a million pieces. It was shattered and would never be of any use again in the unlikely event of him surviving this assault. The destruction made me smile deep inside. The kick was a very nice blast with lots of power, which now sent the body flying to my left, where it collided with the bars before sliding down and hitting the floor. Oh. It was all over in a few milliseconds. The man was still alive, but I was unsure of how long he would be alive. His body was all sorts of shapes that it should not be, and his breath was somewhat hindered and bubbly due to the state of his mouth and throat. He was now a jigsaw of broken bones held somewhat insecurely in a torn and twisted bag of skin. That would take a lot of quick work and brilliant problem solving to put him back together again by any surgeon. I bowed now to my attentive audience. Every eye was on me, and I pointed at them, smiled and dusted off my legs. I sat back down, spreading myself into the seat, legs wide and oozing my utter confidence. One of the brave members of the gang slowly moved towards the now cooling body. I could sense that the guy was dead. He'd gurgled a little, but he was done. The guys making a move to the body were pretty knowledgeable, as two of them moved forward to screen a third who moved in to check out the condition of their friend. They had some kind of idea of how to work as a unit. He's fucking dead, I told them and laughed once more. You guys should now stay in your side of the fucking cell, and I will stay in mine. Strange how none of our most helpful policemen have come rushing in to my aid. Your aid. Surprisingly, they all kept their eyes on me, but sat down on the bench. That I did not expect. I expected them to rush me. If they did attack, it would not go well for them, but I hate not being able to work out the thoughts of the sheep before me. Still, no police entered the room when I would have expected them to be here in vast numbers. This was a definite setup by someone. I was going to turn this now into a fun afternoon. Little did the setter-uppers know that they only fed the beast. I considered with my vast intellect whether or not they were doing this on purpose, but for maybe for another reason. Maybe they were trying to make me kill more people to get me in deeper shit. Bollocks. Too late now. Wow, this could all be a setup of a setup of a setup. Once more I smiled and laughed. Who cares, I said out loud. Fen and I giggled as we sat, considering what would happen in the next few minutes. They had no idea that it didn't really matter what they did. I had a lot in reserve if the shit hit the fan. Well, they were trying to fuck around with me, so that would mean now that I would fuck around with them. Perfect. I stood up and removed my shirt, letting my prey see my perfect body. As I did so, I started to talk under my breath, just about in the audibility range of the gang. I don't believe this, Fen. I don't believe this. These people want me to kill these fuckers. I think these guys are gonna attack me, so I might as well fucking do them first. Fen was now laughing at the discomfort of the men as they started to realise that the guy before them was actually maybe a complete fucking psycho who'd lost it. Look at them, Will. They're shitting their pants. It's a new feeling for these men. I love it when we scare these big hard guys. Breaking through the tough guy's shell is so much fun. Raising my voice now to somewhat of an oratory level, making sure the gentleman in the red corner could hear me, I began to reply to my posit. Well, if they don't think that I'm going to respond to this madness, then they're all wrong, Fen. Who the fuck do they think they are? They are trying to get me in more trouble by making me kill these fuckers, and I do not really feel like I have any choice in doing this. I'm going to have to kill these fucks. Fen was on the floor laughing, his big wolfy head off at the reaction of the men across the cell. They were literally trying to get their respective backs out of the cell through the bars. They started to turn into upset monkeys that you find deep within any man's mind. They now became angry and scared animals, asking questions of me. Who the fuck are you talking to, man? And the such like. None of the human parts of them made sense anymore. They began yelling for help and banging at the walls and shaking the bars of the cage. These toughened killer criminals were begging for help from the police. The police that they hated. It was amazing to see all the different reactions of the creatures that now inhabited the cell with me. The crying, the angry, the lost, the silent, the broken, all trying to cope with a very bizarre set of circumstances. I continued with my purposeful warm-up, a few jumping jacks and a couple of hamstring stretches. Once prepared, I ran forward into now what was the braying herd. They did not even fight back, they just got slaughtered like the prey they fucking were. I got all but one before the CCTV noise and the gore brought the police station to my cell. I think they must have been watching on the telly, hoping that the gang would sort me out, but by the time they had reacted, it was a little bit too late. I had torn them apart, ripped and smashed, pulverized and pounded the living flesh so that the remains were impossible to discern from one another. To help the police, though, to get the body count right, I left a pile of heads in one corner and spread the other body parts artistically around the cell. It was like a bloody Christmas scene with guts and body parts hanging as decorative features. I had the last prisoner by the throat, holding him against the bars as I laughed and jiggled him around like a puppet. Who's a fucking hard man now? Who's a fucking hard man now? Who's a fucking hard man now? I asked him as I held him at arm's length. The guy was doing the usual boring shit of screaming for help and begging for me to leave him alone. I looked like the devil himself in my own mind, and what was left of his as I stood covered in thick, clotting blood and dripping with sweat and gore. As the officers arrived, I slowly squeezed the guy's throat until he went quiet and still. I felt the joy as my fingers sunk into his larynx and neck. They continued their compression and eventually tore into the blood vessels around the larynx, which burst, fountaining his blood onto and around my smiling, joyful face. Each time this happens is something I could just never get used to and never get bored of. It's a divine moment. As the police entered the room in which the cell sat, they were shouting stuff at me. I was in bliss as the red fluid ran down my face and body, so I wasn't really listening. I was enjoying this moment as the so-called soul of my latest victim left its now destroyed vessel. Well, that would be the case if God existed. As I lowered the dead man down to his knees, the first taser hit my body. I felt the electricity pulse through it, and it brought me out of this blissful state with a frustrating jolt. I turned to the unfortunate man who had fired the first electro snap of awfulness, and as the juice shot into my body, I ripped the wires from my skin. This was somewhat of an unexpected outcome for the officer, and he was unprepared for my reaction. You fucking knobhead, I told him. Not my finest insult, I have to admit, but I was not feeling too clever at this time. The poor firer of the electrical assault was not ready for what happened next. I covered the ground between us and grabbed the wrist that held the weapon through the bars. It was a silly mistake from him, and I used his arm to drag him to the bars of the holding cell. His body slammed into the cell where it stopped dead. Sadly for him, his limb did not stop, and his arm tore and dislocated at the shoulder. He obviously worked out, so it took several hard wrenches to get it clear from the man's body. This was going awesome so far. The only additional fun that could be added would be if Fen would come out and play, and I could be my werewolf. Although I really did not need him at that moment. Things were going swimmingly. More tasers now hit me as I dropped the arm and grabbed and tore the head from the corpse I was holding in my other hand. After it was removed from the brainstem, I pushed my fist up inside the skull, forcing out the brain material as it entered. The eyes of the head bulged from the pressure, and I heard some pops of tissue as the skull's contents squirted from its nostrils. It stole my interest from what was going on in the rest of the room. I now had all my focus on the newly acquired squirty toy. I'm like a new puppy at times. I can't help it. The electrical shocks got distracting, so with my other hand I pulled the pointless taser strikes from my skin. I turned the new glove puppet hand to the police. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him. Well, not in the fucking slightest, to be honest. I laughed and smiled at the perplexed police. They had no fucking sense of humour. With the police in the apoplectic state of not knowing what the fuck to do, they could only really watch and wait for the firearms team to arrive. They could do nothing as I scooped out an eye from an orbital with a finger, grabbing the slippy sphere from the skull, tearing it from the musculature of the eyes. Mama! If you could only see me now, I screamed at the crowd. An audience to my violence was an appreciated rarity, and I popped the eyeball into my mouth and bit. It burst with an audible pop, and I spat the contents at the audience like some 80s punk frontman. This was so much fucking fun! How much PTSD could I cause in one moment? Just when they thought the horror and gore show could not get any more substantial, I ended the beautiful memory-making moment by throwing the head at the bars where it exploded, covering the cowering cunts behind it with lovely bits. As the disgust and horror was sinking into my new friend's brains, I made my way to the back of the cell and used my hands that were covered in my lovely brain material to write a plea on the wall. Not guilty. Eventually the firearms arrived and a police officer came forward with his pistol and gave me a warning to get on the floor. There was no way I was going to do that. The floor was fucking disgusting. Swimming in blood, and being honest, I didn't want to do it, so I can be a bit of an arse when I want to be. Get on the floor now! Was ordered once more. I smiled and walked back to the bench, sitting down and resting my hands behind my head. Fen, who had sat in awe of all this entertainment, now started to giggle like a small child. I joined in with Fen, turning the little giggles into the heartfelt guffaws that this moment deserved. As this mirth was shared between us, the police slowly went through their frightened systems to come and get me under what they thought was laughingly their control. That's the end of part 2 of me being captured by the police. Hope you enjoyed it. If you do, have a moment's thought to go down, and there's a link in the descriptor. That's it. Support the show, and you could buy your wonderful host a coffee. He needs it to wash the blood from his teeth. Also, if you want to come to the Facebook group on Facebook, makes sense, there's a link for that in the descriptor too. I've also put my Twitter handle in there, and you can buy a book if you want. You don't have to buy a book, by the way. If you message me, I could probably get you for free. It's a nice book, but it's up to you. Anyway, thanks for listening. Love you. Bye.